Greetings viewers, Eric the Car Guy. 2006 Honda Odyssey, owned by a friend of mine, is having an issue with intermittent stiff steering. So in other words, sometimes it steers fine and other times it's very difficult to steer. In my experience, that normally means that there's something wrong with the power steering rack, and that is what we are here to replace today. What I used to do with these is I used to drop the cradle and everything, the cradle being the metal underneath that supports the engine and transmission and holds all this in. But that requires supporting the engine and transmission up top here and a lot of stuff you probably don't have. So I'm going to try to do this in a way that more closely mimics what you might do in your driveway, garage, what have you. And that is to sort of sneak the power steering rack out the side here. So we'll give this a try and see if I can give you some useful information how to change the power steering rack on a 2006 Honda Odyssey. Here are the tools you will need for this job. Now, you may not need all these tools and you may not have the exact same tools, but the equivalents will do just fine. Safety glasses right out of the gate. I also have some plugs here that I use to cap off different lines, things like that, to prevent leaks. I almost forgot that I also have a spark plug that I'll be using. Penetrating oil, your best friend. You will need power steering fluid, Honda power steering fluid. I have some oil that I put on threads and stuff like that. I have a pry bar. This is a T6, which you'll see you may or may not need. I also have a 1/2" to 3/8 adapter. I have a 19 millimeter. I have a 17 millimeter, both 1/2" and 3/8. I have 14 millimeters for 1/2", also 3/8 short and tall, and I have a 3/8 14 swivel. 1/2" breaker bar. I have this long, I think this is a 20" extension, a 3" extension here, a pair of vice grips. These are body clip things that you may need. A large hammer, a pocket screwdriver or small screwdriver will work just fine. This is a ratcheting line wrench. You don't necessarily need it, but I strongly recommend the line wrench like this. 19, a 17, a 14, you don't really need this 12, but I like this long version here, it's helpful. 3/8 ratchets, both short and long, a flathead screwdriver, a mallet. Also, these are just adjustable pliers. I didn't really use this, but this may also work, a 10 millimeter gear wrench. I have a 1/4" ratchet and both short and tall 10 millimeter. This is also something you could use for body clips along the way. I do use this during the course of the video. A pair of side cutters. I ended up using this air hammer. You may or may not need it. These are 3/8 impacts. You may or may not need them. The only thing I used the torque wrench for was torquing the wheels when I was done. There really isn't space to do anything else. These are my drop lights. I also had to use for these wheels a 13/16 socket, but these are special wheels on this vehicle, and then some impacts. So these are what I used for this video. First thing I'm going to do is get up under the dash and disconnect the steering rack from the steering column. And I'm going to try to keep the steering wheel, or put the steering wheel in a straight ahead position. And once I've done that, I can take the key out to remove the annoying beeping. Also, something really important is after you disconnect the steering column from the power steering rack underneath, you want to make sure you don't rotate the wheel at all, because if it does rotate, it could break the electrical connections inside here, and that could get expensive and mean you have to fix more stuff. So once you've got this in place, try to lock it or hold it in place while you do the rest of your work. Once you're up under the dash, you can pull the carpet back a little bit, and you'll see these little plastic nuts. They just unscrew. Yeah, there's another one up over here that you can't quite see up under the gas pedal. And there may be another one yet further down below. With those out of the way, you can get this plastic cover out. 10 millimeter bolt that's right there. You just take that bolt all the way out. Now this upper bolt right here, which is also a 10, you don't need to take it all the way out. You just need to loosen it. And once that's loose, you should be able to pull this all the way up out, sort of lay it over to the side and out of the way. This is that support that I was talking about that holds the engine and transmission, and it goes in a big circle all around underneath here. And as I said, what I used to do is I would take this exhaust out, take this whole thing out and drop it down, but I had a special tool that would go onto a transmission jack and hold all this, made it super easy. That's because this is where the power steering rack is right here. And if you notice, it passes right underneath that engine mount in the back there. That's one of our obstacles. So we're gonna have to drop this down at least some in order to remove the steering rack. Prepare for that. We're gonna remove some covers and take the wheels off and all that, but that gives you a general overview of what we're dealing with here. I'm not gonna remove this front lower cover, which is a ton of plastic clips that come off really easily with a tool like this. Somebody lost one, replaced it with a zip tie. Be gone with you. Now I'm gonna knock the nuts loose for the outer tie rod ends. And I'm gonna do this now because I actually wanna remove these before I attempt to remove the rack. It'll make it a lot easier. It won't get tangled up on stuff. I'm gonna start with some penetrating oil here. Now, when you do this work, you're gonna have to do an alignment after you're done, but I'm gonna show you methods to make it so that you can get it back as close to the way it was as possible, but that's about all we can hope for here. These are 19s, and just like loosen it and then put it back where it was, because you wanna be able to take the outer tie rod end off, but you want it to stay here so you can note its location for later. Move the cotter pin. I think this is 19 millimeter. And I was right. This is where it would be nice to turn the wheel, but I don't want to do that. I want to try to keep things the way they were, but I want to hit what it goes through, which is the knuckle assembly right here. So I'm just going to hit this with my hammer until this pops loose. It should pop right out. Okay, now I'm just going to spin the outer tie rod end off, leaving the nut in place. And if you have problems with your outer tie rod ends, like these boots are split or they're showing signs of being loose, which you can check for before you ever take the wheel off, best time ever to replace it. Now, there's a few different ways you can do this. You could have counted the number of turns it took to get the outer tie rod end off. That'll get you close. You could also measure this in here. My method has been for years just to count the threads. So I'll just take my pocket screwdriver, insert it into the thread and count them all the way out. 1, 2, 3, 15. It's almost 16. There's like one thread on the end there. So I'm going to call this 16 on this side. I'm going to write that down so I can remember it. Same drill over here. 15, 16. It's not often they come out the same on both sides. I'm going to check it again. 16. Yep. 16 on both sides. There's a heat shield that is attached partly to this engine mount with this 10 millimeter fastener. There's another one up here. And you can just take the heat shield out of the way. Since we're over here, there's two 14 millimeter fasteners that hold this bracket on this side. Yes, I am very much aware that the inner CV boot on this side is leaking. Thanks for letting me know. You might need to massage that line a little bit. This should make short work of it. And this is part of the reason why I like to drop the whole cradle out. Makes accessibility so much easier, but it is a little more work to get all that stuff out of there. Breaker bars are your friend. And this CV boot grease is just making this job awesome. There's one. I got an idea. Yeah, that works so much better. Now with that out of the way, you can get your prize, which is this. And there's also the rubber thing on the outside, which is probably going to fall off when you take the rack out anyway. So this all fits together like this when it's inside the car. We got to get this stabilizer link disconnected. And this may be your ultimate challenge for this job. I know, we're doing all this stuff like removing a steering rack, But since we're gonna have to drop the subframe, it's a good idea to disconnect it here. Penetrating oil, always the best beginning. Thing of this is when you start to loosen this, it's highly likely to catch on this inner part here and the whole thing will spin. This is just a ball joint on the other side. I don't necessarily like to come in here with an Allen head to try to remove these. I have some difficulty with that. So what I do is I come in, I tighten them to start with after the penetrating oil, tighten them, and then I try to loosen them and see how far I get. Sometimes, yeah, this one does not. Sometimes they're nice enough to put like a nut or something on the backside here so you can hold this whole thing into place. They didn't do it here. This is 17 millimeter, by the way. And I'm not even gonna attempt this with electric tools, but once again, I'm going to run it in and tighten it first, and then I'll hit it to loosen it. We're just spinning inside the joint, so next, I'm gonna see if I can get an Allen that I can get down in here, get a 17 millimeter wrench to hold the outside, see if we can do it that way. First, make sure your wrench fits over whatever socket you need, and in this case, this one's gonna be, so this will be a T6. I've never been a fan of Allen fasteners because this just says to me, hey, strip me. I mean, you really gotta make sure it's in there. Wrench. You want to tighten, not loosen. A little more penetrating oil for luck. Don't try to loosen it because you're actually tightening it. Am I confusing you? Okay, too bad. That's why I hate Allen head fasteners. Right there. I just spent all that time and that is my result. Maybe there's junk I can dig out of here and get in a little bit farther, but it only took a second and that was hosed. I'm gonna say, don't even try to do this with hand tools, just because impacts on rusty fasteners are the way to go. Just from my experience. If you try to do this any other way, you know, I personally don't feel you're gonna be as successful. I've been dealing with rusty fasteners my entire career. They like impacts. Yeah. Most useless fasteners on the planet, and the Germans love them. I did mention this might be your most challenging part of this whole thing. You might just want to prepare yourself to have a stabilizer link just in case, because I realize not everybody has access to the tools and facilities that I do. I'm going to hold the back side. Now there's a metal part I'm clamping on. And next, we'll get a little bit of heat. Up inside here, the ball and socket actually has plastic on the inside. Heat this up too much, you melt the plastic, you just kill the stabilizer link. So you have to be quick, you have to be concise, and you have to, yeah, be concise. So when I come in here, I'm going to heat this nut, and I'm gonna have my impact ready with the 17 millimeter on reverse so that I can move quickly, because that's the idea. The quicker we move, the better, the more we can get this away from the heat, all that stuff. And don't point it towards the strut. Point it away from the strut, because you shouldn't heat up the liquid inside here if you can help it. That's just penetrating oil. Success. Yes, I know I don't have my safety glasses on, but I just didn't have time to grab them. So here we are in the aftermath. You can see I didn't melt it. It's still, like if this was flopping around loose, I'd be worried, but it's not. So we are now good to go on dropping this down. Now I'm going to disconnect the high pressure line going to the power steering rack. I'm gonna hit it with a little penetrating oil first. I strongly, strongly, strongly urge you to use a line wrench, which is a special type of wrench that goes around. This will prevent it from getting rounded. I could do it after I drop the cradle assembly down, but I don't want to be working around my supports, so I'm going to try to get this done now, and I think I can just get in there. But anyway, penetrating oil first. Also consider putting like a pan or something underneath so that when the fluid starts to come out, it's got some place to go. Might work out better if I come in from the top. Please don't be rounding, because you feel like you're rounding. I think I've got a better idea. Since I'm having so much difficulty getting this out here, I think what I'm going to do, try to remove the high pressure line from farther up and wait till the rack is out of the car to remove it the rest of the way. The connection for the high pressure line is actually up here on the top of the engine out of the power steering pump. So if I move that line, pull the whole thing out, do it while it's out of the car, I think I'll be a lot more successful. Before I forget, this is the electrical connection for the power steering pressure sensor. Just gonna disconnect that before anything, because I don't wanna mess that up. The high pressure line is attached in two spots. There's one here on the back of the engine mount, and there's one back here on the subframe. They're held down by 10mm fasteners, and we need to remove them. I'm going to take these metal hold downs off now. I'm pretty sure they'll be falling off later. In order to access the top of the power steering pump, we need to remove the engine cover, which is just a couple of flathead plastic rivet screws. And then you should be able to pull it out of the rear ones. There are going to be two fasteners here on top of the power steering pump. Right there, 2 10s. And then if you follow the hose back, there'll be a bracket that holds another 10mm fastener that holds it to the top of the valve cover. I'm gonna go for that one first, since I'm doing it blind. Don't worry, I can't see it either. And the fastener may want to stay with the clamp, but you can just take it all the way out, because if it falls out, you might not find it again. And there's these two here. Before I pull this up off of the power steering pump, I'm going to do two things. I'm going to get one, I'm going to get my plug so I can plug this hose off as soon as I pull it off here, but I'm also going to slip a pan underneath the engine because there's a high probability that there's going to be fluid leaking out into it. I think it's going to be that big. Oh, missed it by that much. That'll keep the damage to something of a minimum. I'm just going to clean this off so it doesn't continue to drip. I'm also going to take this hose and sort of put it down under here a little bit. That way I can grab the end of it, because when I go to pull it out, it might catch on things up here. I want to have access to it. Now I'm going to drop the subframe, but I'm only going to drop it down on one side, but I still need to loosen the other side. But these are the fasteners. There's one big fastener right here. Then there's two more up here in the front. This is where I'm sort of on the fence, because there's still one engine mount that's attached over there that I probably could have knocked loose while it was up in the air. In fact, I might do that. We'll see. But there are 4 fasteners that hold the bottom of the transmission in over here. They're all 14mm. I strongly recommend removing those. Then back here, there is one big fastener here. You don't need to remove this one. This holds the lower control arm in, but one big fastener here and one off to the side here. Then there is the exhaust. It's over here. It's held down by 2 fasteners. Then there's these 4 other fasteners that hold the bottom of the engine mount on this side in. And then it's duplicated over here on this side with those other fasteners. So really there's like 4 main fasteners that hold this thing in, but you want to also disconnect the engine mounts, and you don't have to worry about this one back here because gravity's holding it in place. We're going to support the engine, we're going to support this, and then we'll drop this down enough to get our steering rack out, and then we'll loosen this side so that we can drop this down even more. But we're not going to take the fasteners completely out of this side. We're just going to take them all the way out of this side. I've lowered the vehicle down because I want to disconnect the front motor mount, because when I drop it down and I'm holding the engine up, If I'm dropping one thing down and holding the hinge up here and there's an engine mount still attached, I could rip it to pieces, and I don't want to do that. So I'm just going to disconnect it. And once again, like the back engine mount, gravity is going to hold it into place while I do my work. I'm going to start with a little bit of penetrating oil. And there's a shackle. There are two fasteners on this. There's a shackle over the top of it, and then underneath that, there's another fastener. I'm going to remove the shackle first. Trying to transfer force through a long extension like this is not the best option. But that worked. So when this was in there, it had little hooks. This was down under there, and I couldn't lift it off, so I had to undo these to make that happen. Now there's a 14 right here in the front that I will now disconnect. I'm going to get the fasteners that hold the exhaust and the rear engine mount disconnected. Starting with the exhaust. These are 14s. That was really loud. Just a half-inch kind of day, isn't it? It's a half-inch kind of day. 3/8 ain't gonna cut it. It's a half-inch kind of day. Only slightly crusty. You had to leave the last one in just such a way. You just don't want me to do it, do you? You're like, no, no, no. I'm not dropping this exhaust. It's way too rusty. Take that. I don't care. I don't care that that's sitting in there because it's disconnected. It's not going anywhere. Over here, I'm going to loosen the fasteners, but then I'm going to run them back in, but leave them loose. So in other words, take them out, put them back in a little bit, starting with these outer ones here. These are 17. So it's loose, but it's still held in there. And do the same deal back here. I've got my support under here. Now 2 jack stands or 2 floor jacks could possibly do everything I'm doing here. So anytime you see one of these, you can also use a floor jack. I wouldn't recommend a jack stand because you really can't adjust those unless you're going to leave it here permanently. Which I just want to hold the engine in place. So I don't want this dropping down while I'm doing what I'm doing. And I've already disconnected the engine mounts, so I'm not stressing those out, but I still need to remove these 4 fasteners that hold the transmission in on this side, which I'm going to do now. As I said, these are 14. They're actually nuts in these blind holes. Cool. With my second support, I'm going to hold up this side because I'm going to remove all of these fasteners and hope I'll have enough room to access the last fasteners on the steering rack. But these fasteners on this side I'm going to remove entirely, but everything is supported so it shouldn't go anywhere. Now that the fasteners and everything are out and the engine is supported, I can begin to drop this side down so that I can get access to the power steering rack to move it. I'm just gonna do this very slowly so I can keep an eye on everything so that I'm not destroying things in the process. Kind of got to get this down low enough to where the rack can come out up there. The funny thing is I'm really not far away from pulling the whole assembly out, which is, like I said, what I normally do. But I think that should be enough. This is the low pressure line, penetrating oil, and 10 millimeter. Not my favorite clamps, but they work, I suppose. And I've got my catch underneath here for when the time comes. Hopefully I'll hit it. Notice I said hopefully, which means I have doubt. Anytime you're doing power steering racks, be prepared to make a mess. I have in my hand a spark plug. Go in here after it comes out. And I managed to hit my bucket. That must be some kind of record. All right, low pressure line's disconnected. So all we've got is the 4 fasteners that hold it down on this side, and we should be able to pull it through. There's one here, one here. There's one that comes through here, and one that comes through over here. I'm gonna go for these smaller ones first. I think I can hit those with that impact that I had a minute ago. I believe they're 14 millimeter. Glad I saw where that went, because it sounded like it went someplace, like it hid somewhere. 1 in a million shot. Seriously. It shot across the floor and went into this like 3-inch hole on the other side of the shot. That's just uncanny. All right, see if we can finally get this thing out of here. Because remember, we've got that other line that we need to bring with us. The low pressure line that is clipped in that just needs to go away. Now, just for safety, I unplugged the rear engine mount. It's got a little connector going to it. And I did that so that I wasn't stressing out the connector and the wire. This would be done by now if that line would have come loose. Really, you have to catch on to everything coming out. Ugh. Let's deal with this guy. Now that it's out of the car, should be a lot easier to get to, and I'm hoping that I'm not gonna have the same issues as I was before. Keep grabbing it by the rubber part of the mount. I do not want that. Just keeps feeling like it's wanting to strip out of there no matter what. Nope. I got an idea. Hopefully I won't damage it too much. I am loosening it, right? Yes. Take that. Yeah, I don't want to have to buy this line. And it looks like I won't have to. But taking it out this way may have been more of a pain, but it saved the line. This can still be reused. We're going to need to get this low pressure end off of here. Our new rack does not come with one. That was so much easier than the other one, right? So we'll need that. We'll also need this piece of rubber here and that thing that just came off, which was, I kind of wanted it on there so I could locate it in the same way, but I'm just gonna have to deal without it for now. We've got those pieces off, so now I can transfer some of the stuff over here. This is the new rack, by the way. I always do this with when I return racks, is I put the old stuff, well, first I throw it on the floor, but then I put the old stuff back in the old rack, or the plugs back in the old rack before I stick it in the box. My parts guy appreciates it. These have little O-rings on them. You were here. I'm gonna remove these nuts if I can find my 19mm wrench, which is right in front of me. I think I'm also gonna need to hold this with this 14. Remember, we got 16 turns, or 16 threads to the end. I bet I can speed this process considerably. I'm a genius. Half of you are probably yelling at the screen, Eric, you're doing it wrong. Ah, this looks like a replacement rack maybe. Not sure. Anyhow, it goes bye-bye. I'm gonna put these on, 16 threads in. Oh, thank you for screwing up the ends. This sucks. 15, 16. 1, 2, 15, 16. $15, 16. Should be set up the way it was. This needs to go onto here. Now I'm going to worry about this until I'm doing that last step up inside the vehicle. But as it sits now, oh, almost. You're like, Eric, no, you're doing it wrong. You are correct. I would have been doing it wrong because I need this. And then I can put it up in there. You don't need to super tighten this. This is low pressure. That's good. Now, we're ready to go back in there. Hoping this is going to be easier than when it came out. Aim for the, whoa, hey, that wasn't nice. Either that or was very happy to see me. It's hard to tell. Wow, practically fell into place. Shh, shut up, Eric, until you're done. I'm gonna put some floor dry down here real quick because I just realized I just made a puddle of fluid. Give me a minute while I dry my floor before I continue. I like to clean stuff up like this, like as I work, because I find if I don't, Mess just gets bigger and bigger. So longer bolt in the back. I lied. Longer bolt's not gonna go in the back. That's too long. It's gonna go in the front. These 14s that hold the other ends down are the same, however. Can't believe I got that on there, right? But I did. I was concerned it wouldn't come down past the damage, but it did, and we're fine. Just gonna fasten this other side down so that everything is in place. I'm gonna put the rubber bushing and the clamp on this side. There's a front and a back to this. There's an FR right there. Remember, your shield has to go on the front of it anyway. So much easier going in, right? Found my light. Let's run these down. First, we'll reconnect that low pressure line, and then we'll put it all back together. Let's clip this back into its place. But I want to make sure all my studs in here are going back together also. I'm not going to go too crazy. I'm going to check that rear engine mount too. In fact, you could leave just a little bit of slack on it. That way you can move it around. I'm going to plug that engine mount back in now. Otherwise, there's a high probability I'll forget to do exactly that. So dripping right now. I've put a little oil on the threads because that's what I do. Start it by hand. Do not just run them in there. I do not recommend that. But you see that the threads are engaged, then and only then can you move on to the next phase. Now, as stated, I'm going to get that rear engine mount started back there before I run these up. I had to plug that line off camera. Was pretty much taking everything out of the low pressure line and leaking it out everywhere. So I had to do something about that. I'm going to wait to install these fasteners because I just noticed that my wood block is pushing this over this way and it's going to make it just difficult to install those. So I'm just going to leave those be for now. Just going to run these up a little bit at a time, a little bit in the back, a little bit in the front, bounce back and forth. Peed all over my floor. Almost had it. The only thing I missed was not plugging off the high pressure side of the rack when I put it up in there. And we cannot forget to tighten the cradle mounts over here. Similar to the other side, a little bit at a time. Get these back in. gonna try and take care of this front engine mount. It sucks big time when they don't line up. Well, it worked. Now we have the fun task of fishing that big guy down in there again. Oh, joy of joys. Maybe gravity will make it easier. Lucky me. Let's get this guy back down in there. I'm gonna guide it from underneath because I have no way of knowing what's going on from up here. There seems to be no way to get away from just power steering fluid going everywhere despite my efforts to cap things off. It just doesn't matter. So, you get this. I already see a problem. Needed to go below the AC lines. Oh, please. Simply cannot pull it down through here. While I was trying to pull it from underneath, it kept hooking over here, so there was just no way it was ever gonna go where I wanted it to. Maybe that'll work. Maybe it did. I'm gonna get this started inside the steering rack. You know, all you need is for a tool to save your butt once, and it's worth every penny you paid for it. This just saved my bacon right here. I'll link it in the description. These threaded holes going into the power steering pump had fluid in them, so I just hit them with compressed air to get it out of there. If you leave the fluid in there, you can create a situation called hydrostatic lock, meaning that, like when you put the bolt in, you're basically taking that fluid, which doesn't compress, and sticking it in there and jacking it all up, so don't do that. I just try to clean that stuff out. I still have to make the attachments down below, but now that everything is attached, that's much easier to do. And don't forget about your bracket. Found its way down there. Now I'm going to attach these, the back part of this line, where it lived before. I can live with that. Remember the exhaust that was giving me trouble? Let's not forget about this electrical connection. And our shield. My gloves, they're disintegrating, but we're almost done. Let's do the tie rod in as long as we're over here. I'm gonna count those threads one more time just to make sure that nothing moved, and then we'll put it back together. 15, 16. Yes, you can go ahead and yell at me now. I am reusing the old cotter pins. They're still good, but it is recommended that you replace them. Gonna snug this up. It's going for an alignment, so don't need to kill it. But we do need to snug it. And once again, we'll verify our thread count. 15, 16. Seems easy enough to reattach this lower cover now, although this one's seen better days for sure. Most important ones are going to be the ones that attach to the body. So if you're like this van that's obviously suffered some damage to these lower splash shields and you have limited clips to work with, go for the ones that hold it to the body. And we cannot forget to tighten this guy, right? Snugging him up. And our stabilizer bar. If we're lucky, we can run it all in. Are you feeling lucky, punk? I know, right? All that effort to get it apart, a little bit of oil, goes right back together. Just gonna torque those by hand when it's on the ground. I've had issues with these wheels in the past. I don't wanna mess around with them. I'm putting the wheels on first because I wanna see if I can point them straight ahead, if I can eyeball it so they're straight ahead. Because when we took everything apart, especially the connection for the steering column to the power steering rack, everything was straight ahead. So if we manage to get it back in that same location, steering wheel should be straight when we drive down the road. Everybody's happy. That looks pretty straight. By the way, it really helps if you set the parking brake before you do this. We're in the home stretch. Need to reconnect our steering column. And if I can help it, I'm gonna put this piece right up in here so that when it goes down into place. Just gonna get it started. Look up here. Looks like I need to go over one tooth. That looks right. Oh. You'll know you're in when the bolt goes all the way through. Now here's a little piece of advice. Don't put the plastic cover on until you've driven it a short distance and made sure that the steering wheel is straight. Once you're assured the steering wheel is straight, then you put the plastic cover back on. But hold off until then. Now we'll go top off the system and see if there's any leaks. Start by topping off the reservoir. It's going to get low, so you can go a little full, but not too full. And Honda power steering systems use only Honda power steering fluid. It says it right there on top. Only Honda power steering fluid. Now we'll start it up. It's going to be noisy. There's going to be air in the system, and it's going to need to work its way out. Sometimes it's going to take longer than others to work its way out, so you've got to give it a little bit of time. One of the things to help the air get out is once we've got the system topped off, I'm going to turn the wheel lock to lock. So all the way left, all the way right, and then let it sit. Sometimes just letting it sit gets the air out. I guess I need to put the key in. Now, I did get power steering fluid on the exhaust. It will smoke like that for a little bit. Also, because some of the fluid got down inside the subframe, there's a good chance it's going to leak out of there a little bit, even though I cleaned it out with some brake clean. So there may be a few drips, but if it still drips past a week, then you might have a problem. So far, so good. Now I'm going to turn it lock to lock. I'm glad the steering effort is minimal. It's really easy. Don't hold it all the way to lock for like a really long time, just for like a couple seconds. The fluid level will probably get low after you do that. After this top off, you should be fine though. And I'm not hearing pump noise, and usually when you hear pump noise, it means there's air in the system. So far, so good. I'm going to back it all the way up to the end of the shop and pull it all the way back in, make sure the steering wheel's straight. It's not quite straight. We're going to have to straighten it up. I need to move it just a little bit to the left. Pretty much reverse of what we kind of just did. And this is why we did not put the plastic cover back on just yet. In fact, I don't often tighten these all the way, just so that it's easier to get them on and off. Let's pull it straight up off of there. I just heard the steering wheel click. You learn to ignore the beeping. And I need the key in there now so I can move the steering wheel where I want it. You don't need to worry about these tiny moves. It's the big moves that you need to worry about when it's not connected to the rack. Way off. That kind of looks off the other way. That might be it. I'm just gonna thread the bolt in this time. Here's a tip, don't leave it sticking out too much. I've actually had people do this that I've worked with, and they went out and drove it around and they got it wedged. And that was definitely not a good thing. We'll give that a try. That seems good. Now that we know we're in position, we can just tighten everything down for real this time. Reinstall the cover. Little plastic nuts just can push back on. You don't have to screw them down. A little better. Keep an eye on the fluid level. If it's still making noise past like a day or so, you might have some air getting in the system. Sometimes that happens from the power steering pump on the inlet side. There's an O-ring there. I've got another video on that stuff, so I'll link that in the description. But this one seems quiet. I call it a win. I'm tired and dirty, and that's pretty much how it's going to go for you if you do this, especially if you're doing it on the ground. It's going to be a long day. And when you're done, you should send it off for an alignment just to be sure everything is back in alignment. But the methods that I use usually get me pretty darn close. Aside from that, I hope the tool callouts were helpful to you, and if I skimmed over something in the video, I'm sorry, but I'll put links in the description to all the important stuff and additional videos and information. So please check the description for other information. Outside of that, if you have automotive questions, I ask that you head over to EricTheCarGuy.com, also linked in the description. And if you subscribe, don't forget to click the little bell by the subscription so that you're notified every time I put out a new video, because you want to see it. Anyway, be safe, have fun, stay dirty. I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.